And so a lot of young people, they feel the dissonance in that, right? You're telling me to do this one thing, but all of the factors and the tools necessary and even the advantages necessary to make that thing happen that you were able to make happen are null and void, right? They're no longer available to you, but still make that thing happen. Do you see the imbalance there? So young people's struggle to move forward in the traditional ways we understand growth and development as an adult have been somewhat robbed from there. Hello there, family, and welcome back to the Bastion of Critical Thinking. And if you're new here, welcome. Sit back, relax. Let's just have some deep conversation, long form conversations. If you look at all the videos that I make, child, they're long. But honestly, it's because I love critically thinking through things within culture, like for real, y'all. And I really appreciate bringing critical analysis to stuff that is plaguing us, whether it be good or bad things. Typically, it's things that are more harmful because I want to create a culture where we can critique and reform things in culture and then bring solutions to it so that we can better our lives. So anyway, that's what this whole space is here that I've tried to create here on my YouTube. My name's Raven. I'm a licensed therapist. I'm a seminarian and I'm an author, but mostly I just like to call myself a thought leader and somebody who critically thinks through things within culture, like we just said a million times probably. So with that being said, today we're going to talk about something that I took note of from you guys from my previous video. I did a video and I'll pin it here actually. It's called 30 going on 17 and this will just be a continuation of that video. I did that video because I was taking note of the ways that young adults, particularly young adults my age, which I'm 30 if you haven't watched the previous one. If you haven't actually, you should probably go back right now to get some context and then come back here so we can finish the conversation. But nonetheless, I did that video because I took note of the ways that our culture was starting to shift with regard to how adults acted. And I'm not gonna lie, I got a little mad and I got frustrated because I'm like, why are all these grown people acting like children or children? Child, I want to be from the South so bad. But anyway, why are all these grown people acting like children? And at some point I was like, well, you know what? It is what it is because so long as it's not impacting our quality of lives. But then I realized that a lot of our decision making was starting to permeate from that state of childlike behaviors that we were displaying on social media and elsewhere too, right? Like the adults of the past, and maybe I'll put some pictures here, but the adults of the past were like worlds different from the adults of today. 30 then versus 30 now, it just feels like a completely different age group. But nonetheless, okay, so that's why I did the previous video, but I'm doing this follow-up video to it because a lot of the critiques that I made of young adults in that video were critiqued by you guys. And I appreciate your perspective because like I said, this is the bastion of critical thought too. So when I get other people's thoughts, I start to critically think through mine and assess what my positions are. And then I want to challenge myself. And you guys challenged me a bit. I'm not gonna lie, I still feel pretty stringent on what I did the video about and the conclusions that I came to in the video. However, I did want to offer a bit more nuance within my thoughts because I recognized that there were some spaces where I left a lot of holes that I probably shouldn't have with regard to some of the barriers in society that makes it difficult for adults to grow up in the same ways that we previously understood adults growing up and how they should do it. Okay, so with that in mind, I found a video that is really commensurate with some of the critiques that you guys have for me because y'all came from my neck, like for real. And was just basically like, I'm too hard on people. I'm gonna post some of the comments. I'm gonna pin them right here. Y'all were saying I'm too hard and I'm inconsiderate. And just because you made it, Raven, doesn't mean that other people can make it. And I'm like, geez Louise, be an internet figure and they will come at your neck. But honestly, I love that. I'm just joking. I really do love that. But yeah, so I found a video, Scott Galloway. So he's a business professor at NYU and he talks a lot about these same issues that I talked in the last video. However, he gives a lot of fundamental reasons as to why young adults are struggling and some of the fundamental barriers that are in place within society that make it difficult for young adults to thrive. And so I wanted to outline some of those because I recognized that some of them were missing in my previous video and y'all recognized that some of them were missing in my previous video. So I'm gonna give y'all some space and we can talk about it. What I'm going to do with Scott's video is I'll skip around to a few of the parts that stood out to me that helped to give credence to you all's argument.
I start us with a question. Do we love our children? Sounds like an illegitimate question, right? Well, I'm going to try and convince you otherwise. Essentially, as we go down generations, we're seeing that for the last 2 generations, people are making less money. on an inflation-adjusted basis. In addition, the cost of buying a home, the cost of pursuing education continues to skyrocket. So the purchasing power, the prosperity is inversely correlated to age. Simply put, as we get younger, we're taking away opportunity and prosperity from our youngest. The social contract that is now no longer in place, and for the first time in the U.S.'s history, a 30-year-old is no longer doing as well as his or her parents were at 30. This is a breakdown in the fundamental agreement we have with any society, and it creates rage and shame.
That is still just a horrible figure to really contend with. So I just kind of wanted to pause there and just give some space for us to reflect on how sad that is. Regardless of what the reasons behind it, it's pretty tough. And another issue with that staggering figure that we see on the screen now is that our traditional thoughts around what it takes to be a thriving young adult and successful young adult is based upon the 60s, 70s, and 80s, right? Or 80s is actually when that shift started to when that shift started to change with Reagan economics or Reaganomics, whatever we're calling it. But our understanding of what a young adult doing well in a society looks like is based upon old stuff, essentially. So young adult turns 18, and whether or not they go to college, it doesn't matter, because they can get a good job at GMC and do the little work or even down at the post office or wherever, right? They get the good government job. Y'all know all that stuff. The reason why we say get the good government job, that comes from a time in history where you can get a job that had a pension, good retirement fund, get you a good job with benefits, and it paid a decent enough salary that would afford you a home, would afford you a decent livable wage that will help you that would allow you rather to take care of your family and all of your basic necessities and provide you a few of your wants as well. And then you can live this beautiful, happy-go-lucky, middle-class life. That's what our understanding of successful adulthood was. And the capacity for young adults to do that was just much more accessible than it is right now. Okay, why is that an issue? If you're going to judge successful young adulthood based off of a metric that no longer exists, or a system rather that no longer exists, then that is completely unfair, right? And so a lot of young people, they feel the dissonance in that, right? You're telling me to do this one thing, but all of the factors and the tools necessary and even the advantages necessary to make that thing happen that you were able to make happen are null and void, right? They're no longer available to you, but still make that thing happen. Do you see the imbalance there? So young people's struggle to move forward in the traditional ways we understand growth and development as an adult have been somewhat robbed from them. And I'll make some arguments of why I still think there are ways around it and we should push past later. However, we do need to make that point. So I can see why some young adults feel stifled in their ability to grow. And then I can imagine some of the ways that it stifles their self-esteem, because we're all working under that same antiquated understanding of what it is to be successful as an adult. I saw a stat and it came out the other day that the average income needed to buy a home, I think, was roughly around $106,000. Y'all, what are the average jobs that would allow a freshly graduated college student, or even a not so freshly graduated college student, to come out of university and make $100,000, $106,000 roughly, six figures, in order to buy a home? Again, we're judging if young adulthood and the barometer for success as a young adult is based upon that old framework of you graduate, you get a good job, buy a house, get a pension, you good, if we're still basing it off of that antiquated framework, what jobs would it require for us to be able to still keep up with that same metric? That would mean that we would have to create a society of exceptionals, right? And when I say exceptionals, meaning doctors, lawyers, engineers, we would have to, because those are the jobs and elites within society. It's just an objective fact. If you're offended by that, I apologize, but it's just an objective fact. We've always viewed them through that lens. So that would mean if you're saying that to be a successful young adult, these are the metrics that you need to follow, but now these are the only jobs that are paying salaries that are commensurate with you being able to buy a house, doctors, lawyers, all of that, so on and so forth, engineers, then that would mean we are building a society that only elite people can survive and thrive in. That's a problem, because you tell me in history, anytime in history where you've seen a space where elite people are the only people that existed within a society. You tell me a society where there hasn't always been, where there wasn't white collar, blue collar, and hell, even no collars, right? You tell me a society where you've seen that. Throughout history, I mean, it doesn't exist. In order for a society to function, there has to be a balance between the three. We need all factions of people in order for our societies to run functionally. But what's happened is we've created a society where you can only be either you're elite or you're nothing. And it wasn't always like this. And there's been a lot of factors that have contributed to the decline. But anyway, we won't get into all the nuances there. I just want to acknowledge to you guys that I do see it, and young people feel it. Young people feel it, and it's making them, and it's a pivotal part of that arrested development that I kind of started talking about in this video and in the previous one. Not the only factor that has contributed to the arrested development. Got to be clear there. However, it is a pivotal one, and we can't ignore that. And I want you guys to know that I see that, and I acknowledge that as well. Okay.
This transfer is purposeful. It's not by accident. And it works. Senior poverty is way down, and we should celebrate that. Meanwhile, child poverty is flat to up. The third rail, I'm going to talk about Social Security. It would cost $11 billion to expand the child tax credit, but that got stripped out of the infrastructure bill. But the additional $135 billion a year to Social Security, that flies right through Congress. And every year we transfer $1.4 trillion from a cohort that is increasingly doing less well to the cohort that is the wealthiest cohort in the history of this planet. I'm not against Social Security, but the criteria should be if you need it, not whether you have a catheter. 80% of you have absolutely no reason to ever take Social Security. It is bankrupting our nation, and we have fallen under this mythology that somehow it's this great social program. No, it's not. It's the great transfer of wealth from young to old.
As a person who worked in Congress for several years, well, just 3, let me not say several, I guess several is 5, isn't it, right? So a few years. I am so keen to all of the arguments around Social Security, and obviously they are varied, right? Most times it's conservative style figures that say we should ban Social Security or that we should get rid of it altogether. Okay, why do I say that? I say that because I haven't heard it from this perspective, and I am not well-versed, but I am relatively versed in this. Making Social Security need-based rather than age-based. Yo, I agree. I recognize the controversy with that. I recognize the nuanced conversations around it because we have built this system that is predicated on you investing in it so that you can get a return in retirement. Regardless of your income, old people deserve that, right? Because you've invested into it, and that's how it's built. However, we see the discrepancy, right? We see where, actually, let me frame it this way. Social Security was built on the back of a need. We saw that elderly poverty was astronomical, so we needed to address that. The needs have shifted. We addressed it, right? Elderly people are not struggling in the same way that they were post-Great Depression. Good job. Good job, America. That's one thing I always say. We are good at handing out checks in this country, child. We really are. We are good at it. So great job. We mitigated that problem. I think by 1995, I saw a stat while I was preparing for the video. By 1995, we had gotten elderly poverty down to 10%. Wonderful job, America. Great. Now we have a new problem afoot. Now young people are struggling, and we're seeing the social ramifications, which is what this video and my last one was essentially about. We're seeing the social ramifications of young people's inability to grow up. We're seeing the social consequences of it, but we haven't addressed some of the fundamental barriers that we've placed in their way to make it difficult for them to grow up. Some of it is personal responsibility, which I talk about in the other video. But this video is focused on what are some of the the fundamental and federal and economic barriers that we've as a society put in their way to make it even more difficult for them. So saying that to say, Social Security needs to be reformed because we have another faction of our society that's struggling now. We got those people together. Now what can we do with this collective money to help the other people that are now struggling? That's what this country is built on, right? we have a need that needs to be addressed. What $1.4 trillion is going to a generation of people that is more wealthy than any faction of people at any time in history. That we need to confront that. We need to be able to have an honest conversation about that without as much contention that we try and put behind it. Because every single time a politician mentions cutting Social Security in any capacity, y'all go crazy, understandably so, because old people do need money, right? However, there are factions of older people, millionaires, because it's not need-based, but there are millionaires who are able and can qualify to take out Social Security checks. Is that fair to you? Does that seem not even fair? Because fairness is so, what does that even mean, right? Especially when it comes to a society and trying to make us a healthy, functioning society. What does fairness even mean? Let's take out the word fair. You have a system where we're giving $1.4 trillion each year to a generation that already has wealth, largely. Again, not all older people, obviously. And let me make that caveat. I'm not saying that we should cut Social Security, and neither is Mr. Galloway here in this video. Scott, why am I calling this man Mr. Galloway? Neither is he in this video. He's just saying we need to make it need-based. We're giving out money to people who don't need it, while there are young people who can't qualify to go to college or abstaining from college because of the astronomical prices of it. And meanwhile, we recognize that is the only mechanism. We can say what we want about entrepreneurship and Steve Jobs dropped out of college and blah, blah, blah. You don't necessarily need it. Based off the stats, y'all can miss me with all those arguments. When things change, when the stats change and when people's lived experiences change, then I'll reform my thoughts about college and whether or not everybody needs it. But as a Black person, because this is another conversation, it gets a little bit even more nuanced when you start talking about Black people's experiences with wealth in this country and how to access it. As a Black person, listen, college makes a difference. The average income of a college graduated person as opposed to someone who didn't, the difference in their income over a lifetime is $1 million. That can't be ignored. So with that in mind, and even the health quality of living is just better when you talk about the conversation between college educated people versus non. Okay, so if that's going to be a requirement for you to be able to move from one class of people to the next economic class, then we need to make it accessible and affordable. And so what that means is we need to expand things like Pell Grants. We need to expand things like need-based tuition help and aid and just help getting into college in general. We need to expand that, and we need to make college more accessible to poorer kids. Yeah, we do a lot, but we can do a whole lot more. And one of the ways that we can do a whole lot more to ensure that we're giving our kids and our young adults the ability and a stepping stool necessary to rise, right? So that we're not just this imbalanced society where you got all these overbloated, wealthy older people, while younger people are literally struggling to decide if they're going to pay their rent or be able to get a car. Because baby, if you know one thing, once you get a car note and rent, that's most of people's checks. That's sickening. And it shouldn't be that way. And there are financial incentives that we can put in place. And this is what he outlines in the video, which I won't get it all into it. There are things that we can do, and it doesn't have to be this imbalance. And so all I'm saying is, let's just have the conversation about what the ways that Social Security can be reformed. Maybe it isn't completely just making it need-based, because I get how that can get murky too, because those calculations or those calculators that the government used to say you deserve it and you don't, that can get really sketchy. So I'm not saying completely get rid of it altogether. Definitely not. However, it is time to have a serious conversation about the ways that we can reform Social Security so that we can make sure that we're starting to even out these playing fields that have just become astronomically uneven. Nonetheless, we recognize that government is bought and sold, and we recognize that that'll be a hard sell for the federal government. This is where personal responsibility comes in. And that's kind of what I referred to in my last video, but everybody gets so mad at me because we always want to blame it on the bigger forces at play. Cool, bigger forces are at play. But what does that have to do with you and your life? And that's kind of, and we can end it here honestly. What does it have to do with you and the quality of your life? I know that can sound mean and callous, but so does that not mean that you're going to put real stringent effort into your life to try and produce results that you can be content and satisfied with for your own self? Yeah, things have become more difficult for sure. And as I stated in my previous video, we need to be putting our money, resources, and support behind people, young people in particular, who are working in the political spaces to help try and bring reform to some of these things so that we're not feeling all of the burdens of the economic inequities that exist and that have only been exacerbated over the years. Yes, that is a thing. And also, that does not absolve you from the personal responsibility that is required for you to make something of your life. Difficult doesn't mean impossible. And I guess my only plea here, guys, and truly I'm done, is not to get so hung up on these things. Scott is right. I think it's a really great video that a lot of older people need to listen to so that they can understand the inequities that do exist. Because I think all they see is, girl, go buy a house. Girl, just go to school and work hard and you can get all the things you need. That's what they see because that's the world that they grew up in. Well, Black people, it's a little different. Again, we got to talk about the nuances there, but that's a whole other video because for Black people, this really actually looks completely different. Nonetheless, the premise is still the same. People see the formula, the antiquated formula that we've existed in, that we've built a world on for so long. So it's so difficult for them to see some of the nuanced ways of why young adults are so different from previous ones. So I get it. But all I'm just saying is that doesn't absolve us from our responsibility to still get up, get out and go for it and make it happen for ourselves. And the first step to doing that is letting go of those childlike obsessions, right? Let the kids be kids and let us strive for adulthood. And yes, things have been made more difficult for us, but that doesn't mean that we have to stop playing the game. Work harder, be faster, be better. Because they have put barriers in our way, that means we have to work 10 times harder to eliminate them, right? Or to overcome them or to surpass them. But simply complaining about them on TikTok all day and talking about all the reasons why house prices have become astronomical and impossible to buy it, that's not going to get you any closer to buying a house. All that's going to make us is a bunch of talking heads online all the time complaining and being sad about the way things used to be and now they're not like that anymore. And that's unfair. What you going to do about it? That's my only position. So anyway, I hope that brought some clarity. Like I said, I'm so appreciative of you guys' perspective and you guys engaging with me in these videos. And I know I'm hard and I know I'm a little mean and I may be a little callous, but I like success and I want us to thrive at success because you guys are my comrades, right? Even when I look at the demographics of my videos, the demographics of my videos are my age. Maybe it's between basically 18 to 35, 18 to 40. That's us. This is our time, y'all. Like, we are the adults now. How are we going to make our lives and the lives of our children better, right? And it does start with identifying some of the ills. For sure, that's what this whole channel is about, identifying ills within culture and then finding ways we spend time critiquing it because that's important. We got to make the critiques, identify the areas of issues, and then identify the ways that we can fix them, period. All right, I'm done. That was a rant. Every video is a rant and I don't even care because I hope you get the gist of it and I hope you hear the sentiment of them. But mostly I hope you hear my heart and you feel compelled to challenge yourself to be better. Okay, I'm done. Listen, comment, push back on me if I'm wrong because I feel like a lot of you will still probably feel like I missed some things. And so that's okay though, because this is the bastion of critical thinking, and that's what we do here, and I'm welcoming you to do that in the comments, okay? And until next time, bye. I'll talk to you later.